Segundo Villota Segura had been attempting to fight an extradition order that would have seen him stand trial in the United States for charges related to trafficking. His lawyer, Jamie Balagia, and private investigator Chuck Morgan hatched a plan that would have accomplished Segura's goal while padding their own pockets. Balagia and his accomplice teamed up to demand millions of dollars from Segura, who was behind bars in Bogota in 2015. They promised to use the money as bribes in America with the ultimate goal of getting rid of the U.S. charges against the defendant. After some negotiation, the lawyer and his client agreed on a total of $2 million in payments. However, Segura grew suspicious after paying roughly $1.5 million to Balagia and Morgan without seeing any results. He arranged for a hidden recording device to be placed in his cell. At one point, the inmate could be heard asking for the names of the U.S. officials who were supposed to be receiving the bribes. Said that he couldn't reveal too much and insisted that he was trying to keep Balagia very, very clean throughout the process. Although this explanation seemed to satisfy Segura at first, he later decided to present the FBI with evidence of his lawyer's financial shakedown. Many local attorneys advertise their services by adopting a unique persona or nickname. That's what Balagia did, portraying himself as the DWI Dude. Fans of the Big Lebowski might recognize the name as an homage to the cult classic's character, the Dude. With his laid-back, long-haired, larger-than-life appearance, Balagia even resembled the attributes of actor Jeff Bridges in that role. As for the DWI reference in the lawyer's nickname, he frequently took cases involving relatively minor charges of driving under the influence or possession of narcotics. Before passing the bar and representing clients in the courtroom, Balagia had carved out a career in law enforcement. He also mounted an unsuccessful bid to become the Texas Attorney General, running in 2014 as a Libertarian candidate. He quickly became a recognizable entity across the Lone Star State's hill country, mainly because of his in-your-face advertisements. He even procured an RV with bold outside decorations, including clear depictions of cannabis leaf. His catchphrase was unmistakable: "Busted? Call the Dude." By 2015, however, he left those small fry cases in Texas and set out to represent a cartel associate in Bogota. Balagia contacted Bibiana Correa Perea, an attorney in Bogota who specialized in extradition cases. She initially reached out to Morgan, who had previously worked with authorities in the United States. Upon learning the details of the situation, Morgan suggested that Balagia might be able to help. Of course, all three individuals never tried to provide effective counsel, but instead wanted to make as much money as possible. In total, 3 suspected cartel members agreed to pay Balagia, Morgan, and Perea in hopes that they would escape extradition. After 2 defendants were sent from Columbia to Collin County, Texas, the only one left in Bogota was Segura. Balagia's effort to scam Segura was similar to his tactics against the other suspects, including Hermes Alirio Casanova Ordonez, who is commonly known as Megatron. He was still extradited to Texas, despite agreeing to pay the lawyers $700,000, but he only coughed up half the amount. Upon arriving in Collin County, Ordonez apparently expected that he would be released and his charges dropped. Instead, he found himself locked up with Balagia, insisting that he needed to pay even more money to get out of jail. Similarly, the scammers told Segura that he needed to come up with $1.2 million before demanding even more. His brother, Aldemar Villota Segura, was also extradited to Texas. Balagia and his accomplices told him that he would need to pay another $1.2 million to ensure the case would disappear. Not satisfied with representing clients in the courtroom, Balagia decided in 2014 that he wanted to represent all Texans as the state's attorney general. Like his persona in the local ads and his namesake in the Big Lebowski, the Libertarians' campaign took on a unique life of its own. Much of his platform dealt with reforming the state's marijuana laws. The former cop also campaigned on a promise to bring about more accountability among the state's law enforcement officers. He courted a voting bloc that didn't seem to be represented by either the Republican or Democratic Party during that election cycle, and traveled the state accompanied by a theme song that was written to the tune of The Ballad of Davy Crockett. However, the effort wasn't enough to compete against GOP candidate Ken Paxton. It's worth noting that the DWI Dude wasn't the only one in that race who would later face a criminal scandal. After winning the Attorney General race, Paxton was indicted on felony charges related to securities exchange fraud. By the time 2014 came to a close, the FBI was hot on the trail of Balagia's Colombian cartel scheme. Special Agent Jason Rennie testified that another agent was working undercover as the lawyer's bookkeeper. At one point, the FBI agent brought up the likelihood that any payments coming from Hermes Segura would be from the proceeds of transporting illegal substances. In response, Balagia promised that there would be no issue taking money from the accused cartel members. As of September 2014, the FBI had been keeping tabs on Balagia's bank account, including a string of anonymous deposits totaling thousands of dollars at a time. Investigators determined that Perea had tasked some of her accomplices with making the transactions. According to the indictment, this wasn't the only way Balagia collected the bribe money. Authorities reported that he met with an individual known only as Coco in a parking lot to collect roughly $120,000 in cash. When confronted with this evidence, Balagia put forward the implausible defense that a random stranger simply decided to give him a six-figure gift outside of a shopping mall in Katy, Texas. Furthermore, his attorneys attempted to pass the buck by insisting that Morgan had orchestrated the entire scheme. The lawyers argue that Morgan had been working undercover with U.S. government officials. While Morgan had once been a federal informant, prosecutors in the case said there were no plans for him to work with American officials to accept bribes from the accused cartel members. So what was Morgan's role in the scam exactly? Given his prior experience working covertly with American government officials, Perea determined that he would be able to convince the Colombian suspects that they could see the charges against them dropped. Investigators identified Morgan as the private investigator responsible for introducing Balagia into the equation. Although he didn't speak Spanish, he reportedly spoke directly to the inmates through his wife. His conversations helped cement the case being compiled by the FBI after Segundo Segura produced the secret recordings. In effect, Morgan served as the middleman between Segura and Balagia, making it clear that he wanted to avoid any direct connection between the shakedown scheme and the DWI Dude. Along with Pereira, Morgan pleaded guilty to his role in the scam. He was sentenced to 6 years behind bars, and Pereira received a 7-year sentence. When a criminal attempts to scam someone associated with a dangerous cartel, a criminal organization might not be the worst outcome imaginable. After all, these organizations have a reputation for shutting up their enemies for good. It seems clear that Segura or any of the suspects being targeted by Balagia could have reached out to their associates to deliver a message to get rid of the Texas lawyer. Instead, the Colombian inmate decided to take a less violent approach and simply report the scam to authorities in the United States. Instead of being taken out by cartel forces, Balagia squared off against the American justice system. He was charged with several conspiracy counts related to obstruction of justice, wire fraud, and money laundering. U.S. Attorney Joe Brown alluded to how lucky Balagia was to escape such a fate. Following the disgraced lawyer's indictment, Brown said the dude and his group were running a scam on dealers, some of the biggest dealers in the world. Brown added that it was fortunate for Balagia that these dealers chose to turn him over to the FBI rather than handle it any other way. Judge Brown wanted to make it clear that the American justice system isn't for sale, and he'd prosecute anyone who felt otherwise. In 2019, the ex-police officer stood trial for 2 weeks in Texas Eastern County. The court heard that Balagia made false promises to the accused cartel members that their bribes could make the changes against them disappear. He described the payments he received as attorney's fees and attempted to place the lion's share of blame on Morgan. Furthermore, he pleaded ignorance about the charges against him. Specifically, his lawyers asserted that he had no idea that it was illegal to accept bags full of cash and bank deposits from anonymous shady figures. He even took the witness stand to testify that he didn't know such behavior could land him in trouble for money laundering. Even though his defense maintained that Morgan and Perea were the masterminds, he was merely a pawn in their scheme. The court disagreed, and he was convicted. Another part of his defense hinged on a plea for mercy from the court. Attorney Galen Riddles described his client as homeless, destitute, and broken, and calling for probation in the case. Acting U.S. Attorney Nicholas Gangel laid out the case against Balagia at the time. He said the evidence demonstrated that Balagia had been shaking down his clients for years by claiming that he was able to purchase favorable deals from prosecutors and judges alike. While Morgan and Perea received 6 and 7 years in federal prison respectively, a judge handed down a sentence for Balagia that was longer than both of those terms combined. He was ordered to be in prison for more than 15 years in connection to the scam that netted roughly $1.5 million total. Brown portrayed the case as an important reminder about the rule of law, explaining the Colombians and criminals in every country that we deal with need to understand things don't work that way in the United States. FBI Special Agent Matthew J. DeSarno celebrated the outcome, noting that the Bureau combats public corruption at all levels and will protect and defend the U.S. justice system for those who attempt to diminish its integrity. The 15-year sentence handed down by the court was a clear example of handling officials who misuse their influence for personal financial benefit. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section who you would rather have to deal with, the Mexican cartels or the U.S. government.